Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of the Writing Extensions with me, your host, Mads Christensen. Thank you so much for joining me. So we're trying something new again. As you saw, there was a new countdown, and there was this little banner right here at the bottom. Where is it? There. See? That's kind of cool. Basically, go install something called Extensibility Essentials 2019. So this is an extension written for extenders, and I'm always using that. I always have it installed, and so I'm going to be using some features today, I'm sure, that is going to use this extension. So make sure to get that one. Of course, if you're just listening in or watching casually, you're fine. You don't have to install it. I'm going to turn off this ticker at the bottom there. There we go. All right, so on the program today, I have an extension that I've been, I don't know, it's been out there for maybe a year or so. And I've recently had some issues being reported, and I thought, hey, why not fix them? And they're like touching on various different aspects of the Visual Studio APIs, so we can do that together, I thought. So the extension is called Code Cleanup on Save. And yeah, let me just show you what it does. So if I open a C# file, you probably have noticed that at the bottom, there are some what's called the code cleanup is right down here. Here you can see I can run profile 1, 2, or configure. If I click configure, I can now apply some rules here. And let me just go ahead and do that like this. There are some new ones. And whenever I run this thing called code cleanup, then it will run all those rules. So for instance, if I make maybe if I like have a missorted using statements up here, and I then I just click this button, it will sort them back up. It will run all those rules and make the changes, right? So that's a feature called code cleanup. What my extension does is that it allows me to, I just undid that. It allows me to do all that. Instead of manually clicking that button or Control KE as the shortcut, I can just save the file, and it does it on save. I didn't actually have it installed here, so I didn't do it. Or I turn it off. Let's go take a look at the options that it provides as well. So code cleanup on save, I put it right here. It's enabled false. That's why. So these are the dialog page that it ships with. So we're going to take a look at that too. And you can choose, should it use profile 1 or profile 2? And we're going to use profile 1. So now if I hit save, Control S here, you can see that it does the right thing. It basically runs that command whenever I save a document. So far, so good. So let's see here. Keep the comments and questions coming over in the comment section on YouTube or Twitch. We're live on both platforms, and I will get to them. Let's just dive straight in. So let's see here. Let's go to the issues, and we can just take them from the top. Actually, I see there's one more that came in 7 days ago. Okay, so let's go here. Add support for roaming settings. All right. So if you've ever done any work with providing tools options, you may or may not be familiar with the notion of roaming settings. Let me show you exactly what I mean by roaming settings. So roaming settings is what allows you to log into multiple different Visual Studios on different machines and have all your settings come back. Right. So if you completely nuke your machine and you have to build it up and install Visual Studio for the first time, as long as you sign in using the same account as you were using to sign into Visual Studio earlier, you get all those settings back. And the way we can see if settings are part of sort of that what's called the roaming profile is if we go and say import and export settings. And we go and click export selected settings. We go next. And then we should see here somewhere where it might say either 0, it has no name or description available, or it has the name. All right, either way, it will work. And see, there's nothing in here for code cleanup on save, the name of my extension. So that means that whatever settings I have here will be lost in the next time you install Visual Studio and synchronize the settings. This won't be part of that. I did prepare a little bit, and I added a line of code. So let me just copy that in so we can see what's going on. The way settings work is that you register them in the package def file. Now in Visual Studio extension project types here, we use attributes instead. And I use what's called the provide option page. And that takes us to and I give it the type. It's in this case, general. Let's go there. So I have, if you go to the Visual Studio SDK samples, so VS SDK samples repo, you can see how to do options the right way. And this is what that could look like that I have right here. So I just copied that code basically from the samples. And you can see I get my options right in here. I have the enum to select profile up here, and here are my 2 settings. This is the only thing I have to manually do, basically. So you see all these 4 files that has to do with settings. I only have to worry about the one file where I actually put the settings, the properties in that I need. And so if I just go back, so you can see here, that's what I do. And then I say environment and code cleanup on save. So that's because that this thing here, if we go look, that was the path. It's under environment, and the name is code cleanup on save. Now I could have nested these even deeper. I could have gone something like this. Foo bar. Now it'll just basically cascade, and it will create a whole tree of sub menus. But I don't need that here. Then I can choose to give it something you can search for. And finally, this is super important. If you provide tools under someone else's hierarchy, in this case, the built-in environment parent here, it's very important that you say that this is not a localized category name. Because if it was, and we just hard-coded the string environment right here. So that means that now for all languages, if someone installs this extension and Visual Studio was in Spanish, environment in the tools options will now say environment in English. And so it's important that we make sure that we set this to false whenever we provide a setting that goes under someone else's parent. Okay, so doing the line called provide option page, this attribute, we'll make sure that the options are shown in here, okay? But it does not show up in the roaming profile. So when I export the settings, it doesn't show up there. So hey, I have a quick question. Do you like this view or this view better? Do you want the one with the picture on the side, or the one with the full screen? Please let me know in the comments here. Okay. So provide profile is what takes us into that roaming settings. They're called profiles for some reason. It's one of those things it's typical with Visual Studio SDK that if you don't know, you don't know, and you can't necessarily deduct it by the name. Provide profile does not tell us anything about roaming settings, right? But that's what it is. So here we do the same thing. Let me just save that. And if I click Control F5, let's see here. Yeah, code is more important than my face. All right, people. Got it. So we're building. I hit Control F5. Taking a moment here. James, he says he likes to see my face. Thank you, James. Mark says, do you know of any? So I don't know why this takes forever to build. This is kind of weird. So I'm just going to answer some questions in the meantime. Do you happen to know if any examples or documentation for writing design services for SDK style projects? No, I'm afraid not, Mark. I don't know that, and I don't know even where to begin, to be quite honest. Here's another one. Let's see here. This is for Mark as well. I wrote a V6 that provides a design. Oh, I guess that was just part of the same thing. Okay, sorry. Let's see here. All right. So now we're running Visual Studio. Yeah, Mark, I know it was all one question. I just got it in the wrong order. So I think my machine is working pretty hard here on something. It shouldn't be an indexing service, perhaps, or something else very interesting and important right now. Okay, so this is the experimental instance. So now, whenever it's got a moment, I wonder if it's because I allocated my heavy-duty graphics card for Visual Studio instead of the integrated Intel graphics that is slowing down. But I didn't see that slow down earlier today. Oh, that's not there I wanted to go. Oh, you see? It's because it was opening two at the same time. So tools and export. And now I should see either the name, but I don't think the name, or a 0. So one of these is in fact, you see the one with the 0 is in fact the new profile that we just added. And so technically now I'm done. Right, that's all I need. I could put in a friendly name if I wanted to. Let's see if we can do that at the end. The way I've set up this extension makes that a little bit hard, but we can see if that's how that works. It's totally possible. I did it with another extension just the other day. So I'm just going to go ahead and say that this one is fixed. So we go here into my bit thing. So this one fixes number 8 and mid and push. Yeah, let's just push it too. Why not? There we go. It's not done yet. It still has one outgoing. Okay, so now that bug is closed. Let's see what else we got. How does VS, James asks, how does VS know how to automatically run the experimental instance? Well, let me show you. It's not really automatic. If I go and say properties on my V6 project, you can see here under, where is that? Debug. Here we go. We can see that we actually start an external program, which is dev and vexy, which is Visual Studio, and we set the root suffix to exp, which is the experimental instance. That's what makes it the experimental instance. So if you just go to the command line, write devenv space and then / root suffix exp, then you open the experimental instance. And so every time you build, it actually deploys into the experimental instance as well. I hope that answers it, James. Why is Visual Studio getting slower and slower with each version? Um, it's actually quite the opposite. I know that for some people it is not, and that's fine. But in general, it's actually getting faster and faster every time. If you look at the raw numbers, which is something I like to look at. All right. Okay. Add button to code cleanup context menu. Well, I don't even have. Okay, so I'm going to have to add a new command. Okay, so the idea is actually a feature suggestion, not a bug. So the idea is that instead of you having to go to tools options, find code cleanup unsafe, and then be able to say should it be enabled or not. That's kind of a cumbersome way to figure out whether this should be enabled. It would be kind of nice if I had a checkbox in this list right here that I could use, right? So if I just had another button here that says, run unsafe or whatever, then that would be kind of nice. So let's see how to do that. I don't have any commands here to begin with, so I need to add a new one. I'm going to just go add new item. Let's see here. Can a person target .NET Core for Visual Studio extensions because everything was supposed to be .NET Core and not framework? If you're asking whether an extension can be written in .NET Core, the answer is then no, because Visual Studio itself runs on .NET Framework 4.7.2. When .NET 5 comes out, then at some point Visual Studio is probably going to switch to .NET 5, and at that point you can use .NET 5, but not before. You can still do .NET Standard 2.0 if you have class libraries that, with your business logic for extension. You can have that as a .NET Standard 2.0 using SDK style projects, so you get sort of the .NET Core feel. So as long as there's no dependencies on the Visual Studio APIs that require .NET Framework, then you can do it that way. Okay, so extensibility command, and we're going to call this command run on safe. So this is kind of a cool item template here because it's going to do a lot of things. So let's see here. It's going to write to our package class. It's going to lay down a couple of files. Let's see here. It's thinking about it. So Andy, I don't know if you can use .NET Standard 2.1. It has to be compatible with the .NET Framework 4.7.2. If that's 2.1, then that's fine. I just think it's 2.0. But okay, so here's what we got. We got a run on safe PNG, sort of a default PNG with various different icons in it. We also got a VSCT file. And VSCT files, I actually like to rename them to VS command table. Yeah. And notice how it automatically carries a sort of a code behind. And that's because that I have the extensibility essentials, which basically synchronizes the VSCT file into a C# file. So whenever I make a change into my VSCT file, which is this here XML file, then the values of that will be automatically put into C#, that compiled into my extension so that I can consume those values from around the place. I got the command itself was added right here too. This is a CS file, a C# file. And my package class was augmented. I have now a menu resource added right here. And it added this override method right here and even calls my initialize async method on the run on save command. So this one is complaining that task is also part of the Visual Studio shell. So here's what you always have to do, which is kind of annoying. To do that, to like force it to use task And so now we should be good. We need to add system threading, I believe. Yeah. There we go. All right. So let's start by cleaning up this file. I'm going to just remove all comments. You saw that? Let's check this file out. Look at all these comments. It's a mess. So let's remove all comments. I have an extension called comment remover. So I can just do Control K Q and that removes all comments. Okay. So let's see what we got. We got a group. We got a button. A button is any like here where it says code metric results, that's a button. Okay. And a group is all buttons are inside groups. So here you see two different buttons. They're in the same group. Let's see if we can find a better. Here is two different groups. Test Explorer is in its own group and Options is in its own group. You see there's these separators between them. And then we got bitmaps. Those point to that run on save that was added over here. So these are PNGs. I hate this. I always delete these. Go away, and go away. There we go. So I got my run on save ID. I don't like the word ID, so I'm just going to remove that. There we go. All right, so let's see here. It goes under tools. If I just run this. Let's see here. While it runs, oh, what seems to be the problem? Oh yeah, I changed the word ID. And I think that might have been, oh yeah, no, that's something else. I was pointing to the icons, I just deleted. Yeah, regions. I don't use those either. So that comment remover, you can say remove all regions. That's actually a thing. Some people just really don't like it. So while it's doing that, I was going to copy in some things that I prepared. I already have a GUID symbol right here. So let's just copy that in. There. Let's close it. There we go. So I was looking through this Visual Studio source code to figure out how to get into this particular menu here. I'm not sure I found it. I never actually tried it. But here's the GUID, and here's the ID for what I think is the group, okay, for the profiles, the group. So remember what I said? A button always belongs to a group. So I'm going to change this. What did I call this? GUID editor commands. So GUID, if I can spell it. GUID editor commands, and I have here. Oh. This one, right? This is the one I just added. So now I'm parenting my button to this new, let's call it run on save. Here's a trick. So when you do a command, oh, let's just nuke this line. When you do a command, you need to set the loc canonical name. And now we're going to figure out what should we call this. Let's call it code cleanup run on save. So why do we care? We care because when you go in here and you go to keyboard, and we want people to assign like keyboard shortcuts keyboard shortcuts or whatever, we don't want them to see like this long and ugly command name. Like usually they're like config menu something. Let's see here. You see how long these are? These are just absolutely horrible. There's some that are really long. So we want something short and sweet, and if we put a dot in front of it, then that's what makes it short and sweet. So that dot basically makes it so that nothing else goes in front of it, if that makes sense. All right, so let's go into our command itself. What should happen when someone clicks the command? Now, first of all, you see here how it has the GUID and it has our command ID, right here, GUID and command ID, and they match my GUID and my command ID. Okay. So now I have two sources of truth. This is a hard-coded string, hard-coded number, as well as in the XML file. So that's really bad. So I want to get rid of that. So let's just nuke all that. And where it says command set, I'm going to now do package GUIDs dot, what did we call it? Code cleanup on save package command set. That should have the that should be the same GUID. Let's see here. Was that the name we gave it? Yep, it was. See, I'll get IntelliSense for that now, because I have because I synchronized that XML file into that C# file. You can see here the C# file now shows that, right? See, it just has exactly what was in the XML file. So I'll just go back, and then I have so that the other one was package IDs and run on save. There we go. So that's the same thing. I'm just going to take this stuff right here and put in initialize async. Put that right here. There we go. Let's just nuke all this. Get rid of the comments too. All right, so now we're getting, this is a lot cleaner, right? Let's just see here. So we have our experimental instance. I don't know if we get code, if I just open a single C# file, if I get code cleanup actually showing up, or I need to load a full Roslyn workspace for it. Mark asks if the ResX design service component open source. No, it is not. Well, I think they might have a new one for the .NET side. It might. No, I don't think it is. All right, it's still running. So this one is complaining. Probably we need to check for null. And of course, there is an analyzer for that. So that's what that looks like. So we're going to do a checkbox. Okay. So let's see here. Code cleanup. Are you in here? Yes. Run on save. Look at this. Well, that was lucky because I just happened to find that GUID ID pair for the XML, and it happened to be the right one. See that? Run on save. So now I just need to make sure that it is so what happened to the font size all of a sudden? Oh, it's because I'm in the experimental instance. That's fine. Okay. So to make that button a checkbox, I have to change its type to from menu command to OLA menu command, because that allows me to do this menu item dot before query status. we go. And so I'm just going to do basically grab. So this means before it's visible, before query status means um, when it's where, you know, as I go down to the bottom of the screen and click the button here, as I click it and it becomes visible, the menu item, it runs before query status to make sure that I don't have to do something. So in this case, I want to say button checked equals true. Actually, equals option. What did I call them? General options. Dot instance. Dot enabled. Like that. Okay. So that's cool. Let's get rid of all this stuff here. So what happens now is that as I click the button below here to show the menu, it will check whether or not the command or the button itself should have a check mark or not. But only if the package is loaded. So for this to work, we actually have to load our package, and there's no auto load in here. So this package, because it's a MEF component, it didn't need to load the package at all unless you had to access the tools options for this extension. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So we're going to provide auto load, and it takes two parameters. One is let's see here. Is it UI context? Let's see here if where is that? Like that. Oh, here we go. Oh, it's all capital letters. It looks like UI context, and then let's see. And so we want it. Oh, actually, we want it when a C# file specifically opens up. I never remember these, so I go and I test for Visual Studio rule. What is it? It's auto load. I need to find the documentation for this. Yeah, rule-based UI context. So here's one. Let's grab this. That below. The first thing it needs is a GUID. So let's give it a GUID. And I like to keep all my GUIDs in my VSCT file right here. So I'm going to create one here. And let's call this GUID valid file. And we just need to give it some GUID. It doesn't matter what it is. So Control K space. This is an extension that's inside the extensibility essentials. But you can also just get it separately if you want. It's called insert GUID. Okay, so GUID valid file. So that means I can go in here and I can now say package GUID valid file. This also becomes what I'm going to auto load on up here. That same one. And we're going to tell it that it can do this in the background load. Okay, so do that. Oop. Valid file, we're going to give it a name. The expression is C#. I'm going to write C# down here too. And then we're going to say whenever you open a .cs file. So this might actually also work on Visual Basic files. I'm not an F#. So let's do that just in case. There we go. Okay. Oh, needs a string. It's a string version. I knew that. There we go. So I don't know if you follow that, but the idea here was that I'm now going to provide autoload. I'm going to have my entire extension, or specifically my package class here, async package, is now going to automatically load whenever my UI context rule is satisfied. And it is when the hierarchy selection, so basically when a file is opened that ends, this is a regex, that ends with .cs, vp, or fs. Okay. So when that automatically loads, then automatically as well, this initialize async method is being executed. We never have to call the base class, so get rid of that. And it then initializes my command. So far, so good, right? So all we do this autoloading for is to initialize that command. If I didn't have to show that checkbox, then I didn't have to do anything. When you click a button, it will automatically load the package. So if all you have are packages that are just have buttons on them that doesn't have any before query status, you never have to autoload. In fact, please don't autoload. You want to always make sure that you load as late as possible, so that for performance reasons, so that we don't take resources that are unnecessary for us to take. All right, let me check the comments here. Frederick is asking about Roslyn code suggestions. Control dot are slower in preview versions of Visual Studio. Is that because the previews aren't engined and optimized? No, it's probably because it's a work in progress. So if you've seen the same thing being slower on the preview channel, then that's probably what's going on. It's running through the same pipeline. I should do a Visual Studio office hours episode with someone from the build team showing how we actually build Visual Studio internally. It's very cool. Okay. So let's take a look. Let's open our C# file. This is the experimental instance. Is there a way to chain auto loading off of another extension, like the Team Explorer, for example? It depends. Like if they provide an auto loading mechanism, then yes, it's just a GUID as a string. So you can depend on any other string made by any other extension. You can listen to that same thing. Whether there's one specifically for Team Explorer, I don't know. But if you go look in the registry, you can see all the GUIDs that are there for autoload, and some of them will probably has like a friendly name, so you can see where they're from. Someone is asking here a pipelines question. I don't know anything about pipelines. You can ask it, but I probably can't answer it. So here's one: synchronization context. I don't know what you mean by that. Is it related to the roaming settings and how it synchronized the settings that we went over in the beginning? Okay, here we go. It's to understand how async await works in an extension. Okay, we should probably do a deep dive with Andrew Arnott on that. He's sort of the expert on that sort of stuff. All right. So now, if we go down and look, we can see nothing. Maybe my extension hasn't loaded yet. What's that about? Maybe actually this needs a project the way I've done it here. One way of auto loading that package is I can just execute that button. But let's just see what happens. All right. Yeah, it's attaching the debugger. Someone is asking if for VS Code I want to create a version of my add new files extension. I don't have any plans to do so. If you want to go ahead and do that, you can take whatever I've got open source on the Visual Studio version of that extension and use whatever you want. It's Apache 2.0 licensed, so go for it. But I don't have any plans. All right, so let's set a breakpoint. Let's see if it actually runs. Maybe I clicked the button there. I should have opened the menu instead. All right, come on. Yeah, it's executing the so let's just click it. All right, so now our auto load didn't work. So now if I can just F5. Oh, I changed something. Darn it. All right, so but it's gonna work. So now we need to do something. When you click the button, we have to toggle it, right? So we basically have to do the exact opposite of here. So we have to reverse this. I'm going to set my this. Still have to get my button sender, and then I'm going to save my settings. That's it. So should I do this? Should I be this? I think actually it's like this, because when you uncheck that button, it's going to execute before it actually does the uncheck. So so it's opposite of. So it has to be this way. Yep. It's kind of weird. So that's all that we need to do that. Let me do there was another cleanup here. See this GUID right here? It ends with the BD5. That's always how I recognize them. BD5. I'm gonna do my package GUIDs, and the package string was this one. See, BD5 it says out here, so that's the same one. Okay, so this one says hierarchy. Is it because of the pound sign here? I don't know. It is strange. All right. So that was the second one. Let's see here. We still have a little bit of time. So let's go see what else we got. All right. Let's check the questions first. Could you link to the repo? Yes, it is already linked. So, well, it's linked on the YouTube. If you're on Twitch, you're on Twitch. So the code, you can kind of see the link here. It's under my name, github.com/MadsChristensen/code cleanup unsafe. Someone was asking, how much code can you write while waiting for the debugger to attach? Yes, that is a good question. I wrote a little bit. Google versus Edge. Oh, Edge all the way for sure. I even have Edge on my iPhone. It's the bestest. Speaking of that, you know what really annoys me? So on Safari on iPhone or iOS or iPad OS for that matter, I like always create new windows by accidentally holding and pressing and stuff. It annoys me. Edge does not have that issue. So Edge for iOS for sure. Isn't the VS name for C sharp? C sharp? Yes, it is. But I didn't have to give it a name. This is just, I can name it whatever. As long as it matches, because I can say, I can have multiple and string these together. We can go into that on another time, I guess. All right, James just posted the link. Thank you, James. Okay. Yeah, this one. So bad behavior. Whenever I make a change to a file that is not loaded in the current solution, the code cleanup executes but removes mandatory usings. Right. So really what we should do is that we should make sure that our extension here doesn't actually do any code cleanup on save if the file that you're saving isn't part of any project that you've got loaded. And so that's the fix for that. But, I did do a little research in advance and found a way to do it. Or at least that's how I would normally do it. So I need to not run. I need to not run code cleanup on save, and so I do that in the save handler. So if you're familiar with MEF, this is actually what I hook into. I hook into a iCommand handler for the save command arcs. This is an editor extension point. So the save command arc. This is so much better than the IOLA command target stuff that we used to do. So if you're later than version 15.6, you can use commands. So in your own extensions. 15.6 is update number 6 for Visual Studio 2017. So it's not that new, but it's kind of new. All right, so here we check for whether or not we're enabled, but we should also check for text buffer. And the text buffer, I believe, is in arcs dot subject buffer. That's our text buffer. All right. So what we're doing, we're basically getting a text document out of the property bag, and it's right here. So someone else is setting that, right? We did not set this. Let me get rid of this question here. There's no reason to see that. Right, so the subject buffer, which is an iText buffer, has a property bag on it, and Visual Studio automatically sets a bunch of properties. And these properties are usually like different instances of classes that is passed around with, if you know, it's kind of like, if you know ASP.NET, it's kind of like a view bag or view data. You can kind of think of it that way. At least that's how I think about it. Whether it's accurate or not, I don't know. Okay, so that says, okay, try to get the property of an iText document out. And let's see what we get. If we do get an iText document, what do we have? We got a file path. And file paths are something that we need to figure out. If it's in a loaded project or not. So we say var file. And now I need to, the easiest way I know how to do this, and actually also the only way, I mean, there are other ways to do this, is to use what's called the DTE. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of using the DTE. I try to not use it whenever I can, but there are situations where it's simply too ugly if you have to go through the old COM interfaces, or too hard to do, or too unmaintainable. and then I use the DT. I'm absolutely not afraid of using it. I just, if I don't have to, I don't want to, if that makes sense. So let's get the DT. So for that, I'm just going to use the service provider. Oh, actually, I can use just a static package class, I believe. Package.get global service. Actually, can we do that with async package? Because it has some nicer. Oops. Let's see here. It has a nicer API. No. Okay. Either way. So type of DTE as DTE. I always use DT2. In this case, do I need it? No. I don't think so. What am I going to do? I'm going to check. Yeah, I don't need it. So I'll just use the DT like this. It should only be called on the main thread. Oh, that's right. So I'm going to add a call here to the thread helper to throw if not on the UI thread. So that's kind of cool. That just makes sure that while I develop, that I don't accidentally do something that will end up marshalling from like a background thread to a UI thread and then potentially causing deadlocks. So then I can say dt dot solution dot find project item, and it takes a file. So I should actually say file path. That would have been better. Actually, I'm going to call this item. So if the solution can't find, it will return null. So I can say if item is null, return true. I save, and as I save, you see here, my var becomes project. I'm going to do that again. This is this very extension that I have right now that's kicking in. I hit Control Save, and it will run my code cleanup, and it changes my var to the discrete type here. Because what I have in my editor config is that I say, hey, use var when it's easy, you can see what it is based on the value. So DTE, for instance, is just var because it's clearly a DTE. See? Okay. So that's how we do that. Now this one will not kick in while we are doing that. All right. Someone is asking here, what is the DTE? Well, the DTE is a thing that came with Visual Studio long time ago, and it was a way that made it easy for you to write macros. So it took the enormous Visual Studio API surface and create sort of easy to consume simple API based on that, so that you very easily could find what you needed and write macros. But we don't have macros anymore in Visual Studio, and we don't really maintain the DT either. And we haven't for many versions of Visual Studio. And so it's not always the cleanest thing to do. It doesn't support async await for any of its implementations, for instance. And so that's why I like not to use it if I can. But if I have to, then so be it. Is there always a solution loaded when a CS file is displayed? No. Well, okay. There is not a solution loaded in the sense of an SLN file. But Visual Studio always keeps a solution around, even though it's invisible. So if you, like when you open a file. So technically there is a solution. So you could say, well, I could then simplify my loading up here. Say, I don't need to provide UI context for this. I could simply go up here and do UI context dot. Oh, it was all capital, wasn't it? UI context dot, and then solution exist. There, solution exist. So now this extension will load whenever there's a file open or whenever there's an actual solution open. Because when you open a file, sort of behind the scenes, even though it's not visible in Solution Explorer, there is a solution in memory. If that makes sense. But I want to be a good citizen and not load when I don't have to. And I don't have to load anything unless you load a C# file, right? Really, if I was a good citizen, I wouldn't actually do that checkbox probably. I don't know. Good question, right? Because why auto load for something like that to begin with, you could argue. Is it really needed, right? Let's see here. So let's see. Now I'm going to open it and we'll see if the extension loads. So the way extension loads is that it always loads last. So if your extension is set to load when there's a solution, let's say, not until the solution is fully initialized and all the other background tasks have been performed, such as starting, let's say, a Roslyn workspace or whatever it might be, and there's an idle of like 250 milliseconds or something like that. Not until that happens, we're going to see the extension being loaded. So there's always a delay there. And we can see that if we just open the task status center. So you're loading extensions. And other things. All right. Okay, so I did something wrong in my UI context rule here because I don't have a checkbox. But executing it should work just fine. So now I have one because now by executing it, I load the package. So now we run on save. I click it again. It should toggle it. You see that? Now it's not checked. Oh, so actually maybe it worked before. It was loaded. It was just like when it's unchecked, you can't see it. So now we set it to false. So there should be no checkbox. That's right. So now I click it. And now it should be back to true. Boom. You see that? So this was a screaming success. Oh, we should see whether or not it does what it does when I save. This file is not part of the project, right? So this code right here that we just wrote. So this project line, when I asked the solution to find, oh, the solution is null. I might actually get an exception because I should have checked for null first like this. Let's try it. Control S. Now save it. Okay. I'll have to debug this. Let's see what's going on. Reattach the process. Man, I love that. I think they added that in what, 2017 at some point. I used there was an extension for that earlier, which was super nice, and now it's built in, so that's good. Do you guys have any more questions? We're kind of coming up on the hour here, so I want to make sure I get all, or if I missed any. I don't. So someone asked what the DT stands for. Anyway, I don't actually know what it stands for. That is a really good question. You know, and it's a question I've asked my people around for a long time, but no one seems to know. Okay, I'm going to hit save again. Oh, the breakpoint will not hit. Okay, well, I guess I made some modifications or something like that. That's fine. This all works. It's beautiful. Hopefully it all works. So, okay, that was it. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me. Next week, same time, same place, we'll be looking at a code review of an extension. So last week, I asked if anyone had an extension they wanted me to go through and do a code review over. Just contact me. And Matt Lacey did. And he's a prolific extension author. He's written many extensions. One of them being his extension pack called the Rapid SAML Toolkit. And we're going to dissect that, go through it, and see if there's something we can optimize. Let's see here. A few more questions. Couldn't I get something like the iSolution provider from the service provider and use that instead of the DTE? Yes. So I haven't explored it, but you could probably go in and, so it's not iSolution provider. Well, there might be one called that, but there's also the SVS solution service that you can cast to an IVS solution. The thing is that a lot of those old COM APIs, they don't take a file name per se. They take a UI hierarchy item, and then I have to then find that first. And so that might be totally possible. If you care to send a PR or whatever on how to do that, that would be perfect. I would love to know that. So everything you do in the Solution Explorer is always on the UI thread anyway. So like the whole async await doesn't matter. So it's not like, I doubt that it would be faster. I doubt that there would be a benefit to using one of the COM APIs specific, or even the .NET API specifically for this, since I believe that check has to be on the UI thread regardless, if that makes sense. So there's no optimizations you can do beyond that. I think that hasn't already been done. All right. Until next week. See ya. Happy coding, rather.